Hello and welcome back to the Earn, Learn, Thrive LinkedIn Lives. So the LinkedIn Lives are a 30-minute chat with a fellow professional or business owner in the language teaching world. And I'm absolutely delighted that I'm kicking off this new season with Shanthi Kumaraswamy Street, if I've pronounced that correctly.
Perfect.
Lovely. And Shanthi, would you like to just tell us a bit about yourself for those people who don't already know you?
Okay, yes, thank you. So I'm a business communication coach and I focus on women. So I help high achieving professional women who work in the global market, so either for multinationals, and I help them to overcome their imposter syndrome, their anxiety when they are communicating in English, and to help them ultimately find their voice when communicating. That's basically what I do.
Yeah, brilliant. So, I mean, obviously there are parallels, I think, between the kind of work that you do with your clients and a lot of the kind of work that I do with my clients. And I think perhaps the common factor here is professionals and maybe to quite a large extent women. I mean, not all of my clients are women, but I think within the education field, this sort of imposter syndrome thing absolutely can affect men as well. Because there are just so many messages, aren't there, out there, like in the education world, that tell us that we should teach for the outcome, not the income, as if those two things were diametrically opposed, for starters. And hence the title of this live, that what we do perhaps isn't really that valuable, isn't really worth charging for, etc. And I know you feel very similarly about this because it's not the first conversation we've had about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a bugbear of mine, really. I mean, I started, as you know, you've coached me, so you've helped me also overcome my imposter syndrome. So I've been in the same situation. But I started off as an English language teacher, but I came also from a career of finance, right? Okay, so maybe we can say that it's overinflated. To then see what we're paid for all that work, and I would just remember thinking, "Gosh, this is unbelievable." You know, in order to just survive, you had to work hours and hours and hours. And I thought, well, this is not sustainable. But you know, at the beginning, you do that. But nothing seems to have changed. There's still this whole idea that we have to work for nothing. Teachers are not seen as a valuable asset. Although, yes, people talk about that, but that's just all talk. But when it comes down to the fundamentals of pay us what we're worth, that's a conversation that's not had, not only in institutions, but also in clients' minds. And I see that. And my experience here in Italy, now that I've moved to Italy, is that even worse for native speakers of English, it'll be this feeling of, well, it comes easily to you. Why should we pay you for speaking the language you speak? And you think, I'm a native speaker does not mean I'm a teacher. And so there's an extra. People have talked a lot about non-native speakers or teachers, but there's also the native speaker that, well, there's not a lot of work you have to put in. So why can I not just pay you €13 an hour, surely? And you think, no. But it's hard to, when you're getting that external message coming in, to fight that and go, no, this is not, you wouldn't pay that to someone, you know, and yet for somehow it's acceptable to pay teachers that, language teachers.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I really like what you're saying about like those external messages, because one thing I notice a lot about so-called imposter syndrome, I say so-called because I don't really like that term, because it sounds like, I don't know, like there's something medically wrong with you. You know what I mean? And
Good point.
it's not really like that. It's created by external messages that we then internalize. And this is why it's more common in women than in men. because we hear more of those kinds of messages about, oh, you mustn't show off and you mustn't be arrogant and what have you. If you're a man, it's kind of easier to be arrogant and be admired for it. And I think also why there's more of it in education, because again, there's all those external messages.
Yeah, and there's that feeling that teaching is a vocation, that we're there for the better good, and we're there to help people. But God forbid that you even mention money. You're not here to make money. And so it becomes this running a teaching business or having business becomes a dirty word. There's nothing shameful about asking, this is what I charge for my program. But I think there's a lot of reframing in our minds that needs to happen. You know, you've trained us, you've worked with so many of us to say that is how you see it. If you think money is dirty, oh, it's like, it's like, I'm not going to discuss what I earn or whatever. And you're embarrassed by saying, well, actually, my fee is €50 an hour. Or plus, and if you want me to do extra, and it's like, oh my goodness. And if you then get the answer of like, oh my goodness, but so and so only charges me. If you don't know how to respond to that, then you feel embarrassed. You think, oh gosh, I'm being greedy. I shouldn't ask. That is also, I think, also women. We're not supposed to ask for too much. And again, I don't want to generalize, but we should know our place. And then I'm working with also professional women in corporate. Know your place. Speak up only when you're asked to speak up. Stay a bit quiet, stay in the sidelines, support. And I think I can see that when I'm talking to my other teacher friends and we're having dinner and they all start, I think, gosh, no, why are we doing this to ourselves? We become our worst enemies.
Yeah, no, I think, unfortunately, I think that is true. And it's not about the fact that we're in a helping profession, really, because surgeons are in a helping profession, but nobody is surprised when surgeons earn a lot of money. And it does tend to be like nursing, teaching, female dominated helping professions where this kind of thing comes in. And I think going back to sort of the native speaker and non-native speaker, it's an interesting point that you make about being undervalued because, hey, well, it's your language. But there is also often an element of sort of imposter syndrome coming in there for those whose English is not their first language, because they're constantly told that they're not quite as good. So there's a lot going on around us, pressure from society, all the sort of poisonous stuff that we hear about money and about how you shouldn't expect it or want it or what have you. And then I think there was a post that I saw today actually on LinkedIn, and somebody who's in my membership, the collective, Irina, commented, I thought quite perspicaciously, that we can't just say to clients, like, you should pay me more. We have to get them to see why they should pay us more. We can't just berate them. Very tempting though that might be sometimes. It is kind of our responsibility, if you like, to demonstrate why we're worth more. Yeah? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, I've been working on this for a long time, doing some coaching. And I think this applies. I think we need to take a step back and not look at it purely as the English language teaching. I don't talk about language. I'm always using language as a tool to communicate, but to what purpose? And we discuss this in direct messages. I think for me, it's how do we position ourselves in as much as you're not teaching a language, you're helping them achieve something. So, everyone talks about it in marketing, right? What is your pain point? Oh, my English. No, that's not your pain point. Your pain point is something else. And I know you said about getting that promotion, being seen. For me, if I can give examples of my clients, they're high achieving women. They've got to the top. I don't know, maybe with their English. So the English isn't issue here. What's stopping them is I'm afraid to interrupt. I'm afraid to speak up in a meeting. They have been given messages. Well, strange accents, strange whatever. So all these messages, that's their pain. So if a language teacher, we're going to think about what it is, what is the pain your client or your student is going through, and what is it that they want at the end of it, instead of, well, I'm going to teach them in English. Because I think where we have to differentiate ourselves is because unfortunately we have so many platforms, so many tools. So everyone goes, well, I can go into YouTube and learn English, and I can, yeah, okay, fantastic, go learn the language. Now what are you going to do with it? So I think for me, it's, if you want to be paid what you are worth, you need to niche down. You need to decide, okay, this is a specific client. This is their pain because I can see it's their pain. And I think you said, look at all the favorite clients you have. You've always told me that. Think of the clients you enjoy working with, where you really understand what their pain is. But what is the ultimate destination? What is it they want? Everyone goes, I want to feel confident. Yeah, but confident to do what? I want to be able to go into that interview and speak. I want to be able to stand up at that presentation. So it's not that I'm going to give you the language to give that presentation. It's beyond that. So and it's, what are the consequences if you don't get that? And I think it's the consequences are the real thing. It's like I'm not going to get to that. I'm not going to advance in my career. I'm never going to be taken seriously. These are the fears.
Yeah, totally.
But we have to. So it's not the language. So they come to us because we're going to help them overcome their fear. And on the way, it's all done in English. But if we focus purely on the language, this has been my experience. People see you, language teacher, cheap, because I can get it on that platform. No, go get that. But what you're coming to me is to overcome that fear you have when you're speaking to whoever it is, or to get to university, or to, whatever.
Yeah.
And
No,
only they know.
I totally agree, because it's, I mean, I think what that pain point is and what they need obviously will be different depending on your niche and your clients. But it's always about, as you've just said, it's always about the underlying kind of, what's the transformation that you offer. So they are at point A, they want to get to point B. And in most cases, that is not about going up a level in their English. It's about much, much more than that. It's about being able to cope with specific situations. It's about having the feeling that they can do things that they've been avoiding doing, like maybe they've been avoiding giving any presentations at conferences, for example, because they feel their English isn't good enough. And what they really want is to be able to go and give those conferences and show people what they're actually capable of, rather than always keeping it hidden.
Yeah, staying silent. I'm going to stay silent. I'm not going to say anything. And then there's that frustration that I'm hidden, I'm invisible, nobody sees me. That is their frustration. So how can we help them? Okay, feeding them language is not enough. It's building their resilience, becoming resilient to those moments, because you are going to have those moments where your mind's going to go blank. Whatever, a dominant character in a meeting is just going to shut you down because you've opened your mouth, or they don't have time. They don't. How do you deal with that? Because the language is there, but that moment you just go freeze, and come on, we all freeze. I mean, we do that, and suddenly you're thinking, I can't deal with it. Or someone will question your ability because, yes, you're a non-native speaker, or you have an accent. I was just speaking to another client. She wants to get more business from the US. And people have questions. She's Vietnamese and she speaks 3 languages. Maybe that's That's difficult because then what you do is you're thinking, oh, I'm just not good enough. And you're like,
Mm,
no, that's nonsense. You
yeah.
are, but how do we get over that? So, how, for me, it's helping them have the answer to deal with that. So, building that resilience to say,
And knowing, you say helping them have the answer, it is that, but it's also knowing what questions to ask. And I think that's a big part of why what we do is so valuable, because, it's like going to see the doctor and having a 6-minute consultation. Like a GP I used to go and see actually had a sign on his desk saying, keep it to 6 minutes, please. And being given a prescription for paracetamol or something. And actually, that doctor failing to find out that maybe you're getting headaches because of some other underlying condition, or maybe it's just that you're not drinking enough water. Or if you actually dug into that much more deeply, then you would know, and you would probably come up with something that involved a whole lifestyle change, and that involved like taking various supplements, etc., etc. And for me, that's the difference. If you go and pay $5 an hour on Preply, you're just getting the paracetamol. Um,
mm,
Whereas what you're doing is so much deeper than that, and the results are going to be so much better. But we've got to
absolutely.
help people see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your analogy because it's what I say. All you're doing is putting a plaster over that
Mm,
wound, but you're
yeah.
not digging deep to see where it's coming from. This anxiety, and that's where I've seen with clients. Having worked with them, that ultimately the anxiety wasn't coming from the English. It was
Mm,
something other things that. So unless, but if you don't, and so your point about questions is let's dig. Let's question, your limiting beliefs, looking back at your upbringing, your culture, and there's so many things that can have an impact on how we show up. It's like, for example, speaking up. If you come from a culture that doesn't speak up and you were not encouraged to, so a lot of the Asian cultures, they're excellent at memorization, they're excellent at that, but they work in a multinational where you're expected to speak up and then that's it, they go mute. Perfect English. But so how do we that's where I think we help. Hey guys, you've got all that academic stuff.
mm-hmm,
Now let's help you. It's the same with schools here, for example, in Italy. They're taught not to make mistakes. Don't open your mouth until you have a pitch perfect sentence. They're not ready for the market. They're not ready for the world of work. So
mm,
we're holding back an entire generation of young people ready to embrace the global market because they're not going to speak. I'm not here to get them through the IELTS exam. So,
mm.
yes, we can help them, but it goes beyond that. So, how can we add to our basket of, yeah, I'll prepare them, but I will also help
Uh,
them get to their next step?
and it is helping people to see the value of that, because I think it's quite normal and human that people get very sort of caught up on, no, but I just need to get this past this exam, or I just need to, and that's kind of all I want to pay for. And I think it's quite a sort of subtle, in terms of marketing, it's quite a subtle balance theoretically. And a niche teacher gets someone from A to B quicker. And I think that's true. So I think that's one of the things that we can say truthfully, because I really know what you need, because I understand your niche. I will be able to help you more quickly than somebody who's just throwing jelly at the wall, as we say, and seeing what sticks. So that's one way I think that we can market it. We can also educate people, I think, to a degree about what actually is involved in this whole process, and that it's more than you think. And I think we can also, you mentioned this earlier, Shanti, but we can focus on, well, what have you tried before? And did it work? No. How much have you invested in doing that? Time and money. Was that a good investment? No. So maybe it's time to kind of, invest in someone who really can help you and get you what you need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've had people, I've always asked the question, so what have you done? Has it
Mm,
worked? And why do you think? And yeah, and always it's been, I did a series of courses, I did, and whatever. but it never got me more confident. It didn't get me to what I was hoping to get to, which is, and it's all very, very real stuff. It's your, I need to, the problem is when we have this academic idea of language, we just forget that this is only a tool. So we need to break down, say, what would you like to do with this? Where do you see yourself? I like to ask lots of questions because I think, it's okay. So where do you see yourself? And what do you think is holding you back? What is holding you back truly? And it's always interesting because what comes out is not the language they think it is. So if we can keep probing, and I think that's as teachers, if we want to, I suppose take the coaching mindset of, yeah,
Yeah.
great, you can get any teacher. If you want a language teacher who's just going to teach you the language, go get. But what you're coming to me is we're going to keep probing because we want to know more. We want to see where do you want to take this language and what do you want to do with it?
Absolutely.
And then tell me, where do you want to go? What you do? And so what's stopping you? Okay, now we're going to work on what's stopping you on that. So for me, I know I go down towards the psychology and I'm not a psychologist, but for me, that's what it is. Because if we think about ourselves and we think about going back to gender, going back to women, so much is the story we tell ourselves, right? And if people have also told you your English is not good enough, or you've always struggled and you never got 10 out of 10 at school, and you didn't, yes, you can find, I'm just not good at languages, I'm just not good at this. So it's a story you keep telling yourself and you'll believe it. And then
Yeah.
you think, well, I'm never going to. But then, oh, where's the evidence of that? Because I mean, you taught yourself English 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and you're now working in Microsoft. So at what bit did this English
No,
become a
but
problem?
we only notice the negatives, don't we? Like we just dismiss all the positives and
Yeah,
notice the negatives. But I think it was just making me think when you were saying that, that this is why, like telling client stories, obviously with their permission or anonymized or whatever, and testimonials are so powerful. And this is something that I see people often avoid, or they will put it up, but they'll just say something like, I was so delighted to get this good testimonial. And it's like, that's not the point, right? It's not about how great you are. All right. That doesn't hurt. But the point is that your potential clients can see themselves in those stories and start to believe, oh, well, if they can do that and they were in that situation and they felt like me, well, maybe I can as well. And that's a huge part of our job, I think, is to help people not just trust us, but to trust that they can actually do it.
yeah, yeah. And I think it goes back also to what you said in the past, where we minimize our achievements, we minimize the results we get. Again, I have to say that is quite often women, we minimize. It's the usual, oh, Jai, you did a great job there. Oh, really? No, well, I had, people who just, it's like, fabulous dinner. Oh, no, but it was a quick recipe I got. I think, for goodness sake, just accept the compliment, just take it. I've written it. And it's the same with results. You're like, oh, gosh, man, I don't want to brag. It looks terrible. And you're like, well, if you're not going to brag, who the hell is going to? Oh, sorry, I
Yeah.
shouldn't say that. If you don't speak up for yourself, nobody else is going to. And it's the same with when I work in the corporate world. If you're not the one that puts your hand up, and nobody, unless you have an amazing leader or boss and I'm not saying being forceful, but just being quietly confident, hey, I can get you this. And this is the result this client had. This was where they were, and this is how they, and yeah, absolutely. And someone will go, wow. And I came to you because you shared your testimonials, you shared your results, and you think, oh, wow, and ultimately it's like they get me. This person gets me. They understand what I'm going through. And also, if you've had your own story, then, this is what I struggled with because English is my first language. So struggle, I just think, how can I identify, get them to identify the fact that, I struggled. So it turned out it's more for me was a woman in corporate,
Yeah.
someone who you still struggled, even though it was your first language. So it was still, finding a way and then doing this also in Italian. So yeah, I mean, for me, it is. I mean, stories, it's your personal stories and your client stories.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and no, yeah,
And
not just screenshotting everything.
it's being human, it's being authentic, it's being appropriately vulnerable, by which I mean not like I'm a hot mess all over the internet, um, but sharing things that you found difficult, and also owning your authority and that you do know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and it can be both, I think. You don't have to be sort of, God, I'm just wonderful and there's nothing wrong with me, or, oh, I'm not going to say anything about myself. There's plenty of middle ground, I
Yeah.
think. And,
No, absolutely.
and I think we do need to start taking up more of it and
Yeah.
not be.
Taking up more room.
Yes,
That's it,
exactly.
right? We have to take more room. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just shuffle everybody up and
yeah,
just say, listen, I belong here. And I think that's it. It's that sense of belonging. You've always said this, your ideal client, pick that one person and you're writing to that one person of
yeah,
this is the person I'm speaking to. And I know exactly what's happening. And also, I mean, I think you've said this many times when you're working with clients, when they say and they mention stuff, that's great content for your writing. So, for example, we're living with the reality of accent bias, we're living with the reality of non native speakers and having a different name and how do you manage it? So it's not a question of I'm going to eradicate that. You're saying, well, I get it. It is that is the reality. We have to live with, but we're going to navigate that together. And for me, I'm a big thing about let's build resilience because for me, bottom line, English language, whatever, is to become strong and courageous, and you know to face that world. I know it sounds all very, but it is an intimidating world where English is the main language in business, in global. We're in privileged situation, right? Our first language is English. But to think, and then not only that, then you're also figuring out the corporate world. You're having to deal with a whole bunch of stuff, microaggressions, just difficult personalities, and there's so much else that gets added. So we need to kind of like, okay, which bit is the worst part? And that's why I've moved away from purely language teaching, because for me it was, this goes way beyond language. And I think if you're that way inclined, I'm not saying all language teachers are going to watch them and go, oh no, I don't want to be down that way. Fine. But we're human beings and we're working with human beings. Let's see what's going on. Communication ultimately is about connecting, it's about collaboration, and it takes different shapes.
yeah.
And if you are a woman in business, if you're a woman in the corporate world, in the world of work, there are a lot of issues that you are going to face. And oh yes, of course, the men who are listening, absolutely, there are lots of things. You're dealing with difficult bosses, hierarchies, so much that can stifle our voice. And I think that for me is more important than the language. So if we can actually say, I'm going to help you with this language that you have, which doesn't have to be perfect, to make your way in the world. And I know it sounds wah, wah, wah. But these words to help you make an impact or help you make your way through the world. And if it's especially a young person, I'm going
Yeah.
to guide you, then that's powerful. As opposed to, I'm the teacher who's going to get through your exam.
I think you're absolutely right. So much of this is actually about courage, about our courage to put ourselves out there and say, yeah, this is what I do, this is how I help people. And also our clients' courage and mutual encouragement and support, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, it is the courage, when we think about it, it's the courage to deal with the day to day in that second language. And I learned it when I came here, and I'm fluent in Italian. But there are many, many times when I'm sitting there petrified or anxious because I don't understand what that person's saying. I have no idea. But I want to be respected and say, I don't need that person shouting at me or being dismissive or being impatient with me. But that scares you. And I'm at my age and I want to make a good impression. I don't want to make too many mistakes. Wow, that's a ton of baggage to to handle, right?
Yeah.
But that is our reality. I go into a shop or I go into an office or I'm giving a presentation. This person shuts me down, and I don't know what to say, or this person's speaking too fast, and I have to have a way to say, you have to slow down, but without this apology that all of us feel like saying. And so for me, that's the mini, I've written a post about these mini moments of courage that add, micro acts of courage that lead to this confidence that we build in ourselves.
Yeah, no, I love that, the micro acts of courage. I think that's a lovely place to leave it. And yeah, if you're not already following Shanti, I highly recommend that you do, because her posts are always extremely readable, and she's doing some great work out there. So thank you very much for joining me.